Welcome to Chautauqua, people. Our guest today is Dr. Alan Steere. He's a longtime Chautauquan and is best known for the instrumental role he played in connecting the dots which led to the discovery of Lyme disease. He's published over 350 scientific papers. He recently took a partial retirement from his positions at Harvard Medical School and the Massachusetts General Hospital, and he's spending his first full summer here at Chautauqua. How did your Chautauqua family get you here?
I married into Chautauqua. My wife's family, ancestors had come here more than 100 years ago and came here for an education. Loved the place, have stayed on, and we're the recipients of that largesse.
So how is the family home then passed?
Well, it's through the women, and most of them have been named Margaret.
Really?
As is my wife.
Okay. And so it goes from Margaret to Margaret.
Yes.
And the boys are left out. That's
well, we get to come too, but so we benefit.
But you know whose house it is.
That's right.
No question about that. So you're a long-term Chautauquan, spending more time this summer. What's your educational background?
Oh my. Well, where to begin? We grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I went to high school there, but I came east to go to school or college at Columbia, and then medical school was also at Columbia in New York. My junior faculty period was at Yale, and now my senior period at Harvard.
Now, how did you come? What is your medical specialty, and how did you come to develop that?
My medical specialty is rheumatology. I was influenced by the fact that Columbia, it was an important division within the Department of Medicine, and so there were mentors that were important in introducing me to that rather new subspecialty. But I've also been interested in infectious diseases and bringing the two fields together.
And so when you were looking for postgraduate programs, did that influence your selection?
Yeah, it certainly did. I had been at Centers for Disease Control in the Epidemic Intelligence Service. So I was sent around the country to evaluate outbreaks of disease. But it was a 2-year commitment. And I then went for a postdoctoral fellowship at Yale. And an important part of making that decision was they had a tradition of combining rheumatology and infectious diseases.
Really?
Yes. Unusual. But it appealed to me.
Now, how did you stumble across, how did you end up doing work on Lyme disease?
Well, 4 months after my arrival at Yale as a postdoctoral fellow, I heard from a person that I had known at CDC in the Epidemic Intelligence Service who was serving in the Connecticut State Health Department, David Sneidman, and he had heard from 2 mothers in Lyme, Connecticut, who said there were many children in Lyme, Connecticut, which is a small community, that had been infected with arthritis. So many that they felt it must be something. David Sneidman knew that I was at Yale in this rheumatology fellowship, but interested in infectious disease, and I'd done outbreak work. So he called me about it and asked what I thought. I said that I thought a cluster of children who were thought to have juvenile rheumatoid arthritis was unheard of. But we started a program or a study to evaluate children from Lyme, Connecticut. And an important part of that was a mother by the name of Polly Murray, who had kept a notebook about children and adults that she had thought had been affected with this unusual malady. And I began to work with that the health department as well, and began to see this group of children that indeed had arthritis that looked compatible with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis.
What were the primary symptoms?
Well, the most common thing would be swelling of a knee. Sometimes it was more than that, but that would be the most common finding. An inflammatory response within a knee. But it was the epidemiologic findings, the clustering, that suggested this was something different. If there had been one child in Lyme, Connecticut who had juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, maybe that would be what one might expect. Instead, we were able to identify 39 children.
Wow.
And 12 adults who had an apparently similar type of arthritis. And not only that, there was clustering within the community. On several roads, 1 in 10 children had arthritis, and sometimes in the same family. That's so many that one indeed concluded this must be something else. And the epidemiologic fingerprint was suggestive of an arthropod borne illness. Well, an insect would be another name for it, an insect-borne disease. So very different than juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, but causing a similar picture.
And so you had these numbers. Then what?
Well, then what? In fact, this is an important thing to emphasize.
Go for it.
It isn't that one does anything really by yourself in an academic research university. There are other people, there are other mentors that play a role. I was talking with people. We were trying to understand what this was. A quarter of the children talked about an unusual skin lesion before the onset of arthritis, or their parents described it. This unusual expanding skin lesion that they thought was probably an insect bite, but they'd never seen anything like it. Now, it was 25% of the parents, but since the epidemiology was suggestive of an arthropod-borne illness, it was great interest of somebody describing an unusual skin lesion that they thought was an insect bite sometime in the weeks or months before the onset of arthritis. So I presented this information. I hadn't seen anyone yet with this skin lesion because they were describing that it occurred in the summer. But that isn't when I started working on this. But at any rate, I presented at a dermatology conference at Yale. And there was a Danish dermatology resident who said, this sounds like what we call erythema chronica migrans. It wasn't something that we were familiar with in the United States, but they were familiar with it, and that they thought it was caused by a tick bite. And the type of tick was similar to what we had learned because the entomologists started working on the ecology of that community. They started finding that tick as well, one that looked quite similar to what was described in Europe. On the other hand, in Europe it was not described that arthritis was associated with it.
Really?
So we began to follow the children, or in adults as well, that developed that type of skin lesion and just followed them to see what happened. Well, 3/4 of them developed arthritis. That was like what we had seen before. So it implicated that indeed that skin lesion and likely a tick bite was the cause of the illness. Now, that we were able to put together within several months. Some more confirmatory information about it in the coming several years. But the big question was, what was the tick transmitting that was causing this disease? What was the infectious agent? And there the experience from Europe was quite helpful.
Really?
That they thought that it was a skin lesion that would respond to penicillin therapy. We were skeptical of that at first because what we were seeing was arthritis, and by the way, we also began to see other things happening as well. It included various types of neurologic involvement, meningitis, heart involvement, complete heart block, a range of types of illness. It was not clear that you could just treat all of that with penicillin, but what we began was a study of patients who had the skin lesion. And we came to think as well that the skin lesion did indeed respond to antibiotic therapy. So if that responded to antibiotic therapy, we also began studies of patients who had arthritis or neurologic involvement or cardiac involvement of the disease, and came to think indeed this was a penicillin treatable illness, but still what was causing it was difficult to identify. For that, our colleagues at the Centers for Disease Control and the National Institutes of Health were very important. In fact, I would want to emphasize the synergy between what was happening in the research university at Yale with the State Health Department, with the Centers for Disease Control, as well as with various investigators in Europe. And it was really the confluence of this that led to the discovery of the disease, of the infectious agent causing the disease, which is an unusual one. It's a spirochetal bacterium. The best known human disease that's caused by a spirochete is syphilis. They're unusual diseases. They occur in stages with different manifestations at different times, and making it more difficult to figure out what's going on. But at any rate, I was on the infectious agent, and specifically, there was a person at the NIH Hamilton, Montana institution that had had a lot of experience with dissecting ticks and describing infectious agents in them. We said, in essence, that we're looking for a spirochete, we think, but we haven't been able to find that. He did. But it was really not known how to culture the organism. And you needed to be able to do that in order to be able to learn more about it. There was a program at the Rocky Mountain Laboratory in Hamilton, Montana, in which Alan Barber and Herb Stoner were running that laboratory, and they had been working on how to grow Borrelia, the type of spirochete that can be found in ticks. People had worked on trying to do that for over 100 years.
Wow.
But they had a long list of ingredients and succeeded in learning how to grow that organism. Willy Bergdorfer, the entomologist who was the one who was dissecting ticks, gave Alan Barber one of the ticks, more than one of the ticks, but nothing grew. Alan put the flasks up on a shelf, though. He didn't throw them away. And a month later, the color turned within the culture medium, indicating that some growth had taken place. And looking under the microscope, could see this newly recognized spirochete that's now called Borrelia burgdorferi, the agent of Lyme disease. I might add, since that time, 5 more infectious agents have been found in that same tick.
Really?
Called the deer tick, that affects the adult stage, but it's an immature stage of the tick that's very tiny, somewhat difficult to see, that is responsible for the transmission of the Lyme disease agent and most of these infectious agents.
Now, what treatments came out of this?
Yeah, so once it was really shown and proven that we could culture this newly recognized spirochetes from patients, we could show that their immune response was directed against that particular agent, it becomes possible to do much more. First of all, it proved that this was a spirochetal infection that could be treated with antibiotic therapy, at least in most patients. It's also then possible to develop diagnostic tests that allow you to identify the immune response, the antibody response to that infectious agent. And work on a vaccine also started soon after. All of this was made possible once we were certain of the infectious agent causing the disease.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I've skipped ahead about 10 to 20 years over the development of diagnostic tests, the treatment trials to work out antibiotic treatment regimens, and to carry out a vaccine study.
So we're really talking decades of work.
Yeah, alas, we are. On most days, one comes to work and the results of what you're trying to do are negative. But on occasion, the great day comes when one gets it figured out and there's a new finding that is important that advances the field. So those are the great days.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've developed some ideas about antibiotic therapy. What happened to those early patients? Were they subsequently went back and treated, or?
It's really the combination of antibiotic therapy and the host immune response that are important in treatment of the disease. So before we knew about antibiotic therapy, one was totally dependent on the host immune response. And in most people, they did recover from the infection.
Mm-hmm.
But if they had not, yes, they were then offered treatment with antibiotic therapy. So in general, people did well. Of course, we began to learn about certain post-infectious syndromes. Now, this kind of problem is really coming to the fore now because of COVID and so-called long COVID.
Yeah.
So there's the acute infection, in that case a viral infection. But it can be followed by symptomatology that often includes profound fatigue, sometimes pain that's diffuse, and sometimes neurocognitive difficulty. But there's a range of post-infectious syndromes and symptoms. So we started learning more that this could follow Lyme disease as well. If that happens, we were learning as well that treatment with antibiotic therapy didn't seem to work. It could work well for the acute infection, but not the post-infectious problems. And there was also a post-infectious joint or arthritis problem that could develop after having had the infection. Again, largely confined to knees, sometimes spreading, though, to other joints. With that, it's kind of come full circle to the idea that we're treating those people the way juvenile rheumatoid arthritis would be treated, with immunosuppressive agents.
Yeah.
It seems that the infection causes a hyperimmune response. In other words, too much, it's too vigorous, that does not turn off appropriately and can have autoimmune features in which the immune cells start attacking self structures, typically within the joint.
Really?
But it can spread beyond that.
Mm-hmm. So indeed, it's a much bigger problem than simply killing off some spirochetes.
That is true. Medicine is humbling. And there's great variability in a population. Whenever I make that statement, I always say, and that's why we're still here on the planet, that there's enough variation that not everyone reacts badly to a given infectious agent. But at any rate, what that also means is that in some infections, they can trigger, well, we call it a hyperimmune response, but it's too active. There's too much inflammation, and that inflammation causes damage to the host.
Mhm.
So we're still learning about that now. I realize I'm skipping ahead
Oh, no.
years to do that.
Yeah, no problem. Now, your current efforts, current projects, typically you would then work on them for how many years?
Oh, years. You know, from the original observation about clustering of children in Lyme, Connecticut to finding the infectious agent was 8 years.
8 years.
But working on vaccine development, well, it was 20 years really until the first vaccine was introduced on the market, though that was pulled from the market. A very similar vaccine is now being tested, and so we're getting towards, 30 years
Goodness.
of working on that particular preventive step.
Yeah. Now, let's step along a little bit here. Can you identify what were the milestones in identifying Lyme disease and its treatment?
Yes, I think so. The first one came quickly in the first months of realizing this was not juvenile rheumatoid arthritis.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, we postulated within about 4 or 5 months that this was a tick-borne infection and likely a tick-transmitted infection. So I would say that was the first milestone in getting us going in that direction. The next important milestone was really another 8 years to identification of the actual infectious agent within the tick that was causing the disease, and then showing that was the infectious agent that got transmitted to human beings, because we could find that spirochete, well, in the initial skin lesion or in, well, various places
Mhm.
within the body, and the immune response directed against
Mhm.
the organism. So we're 8 years into it now. That led to antibiotic treatment studies and development of specific diagnostic tests. So that's another 10 to 15 years after identification of the infectious agent, but also then work on prevention through vaccination. And as I've said, that's really another 20 years
Mhm.
until the first vaccine was put on the market, though then pulled from the market.
Mhm.
Now we're in this period of really trying to understand these post-infectious phenomena. Now, I'd say the same thing is true in COVID.
Mhm.
It's still not well understood at all how that happens, or really how to treat people, how to help people
Mhm.
who have that complication.
Mhm.
With Lyme disease, it's really pretty recent that we were able to really show that autoimmune phenomena can happen
Mhm.
as a result of the infection and result in persistent disease in the joint. We're still really trying to understand what we call post-treatment Lyme disease syndrome, but the syndrome of marked fatigue, neurocognitive deficits, diffuse pain that can develop after a number of infections, not just Lyme disease, but it includes Lyme disease. So that's where we are now. We're almost exactly 50 years since the initial investigation. We've, I think, accomplished a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
there's certainly been a lot of progress, but persistent challenges. The persistent challenges, first of all, include with that tick and the ecology of the disease. It's spreading to new locations.
Really?
Well, it really seemed to start out primarily on the East Coast, or I should call it the Northeast, I mean Lyme, Connecticut. But there was also a focus then in northern Wisconsin and Minnesota. So those were the two foci. But it's been spreading in every direction. since then, really contiguously. So now out in Ohio, Michigan, becoming quite affected, but that is new. It's moved way up into Canada, it's moving somewhat south, and suburban parts of our big cities have been particularly affected. The ecology of the disease particularly affects those areas. I won't go through explaining all of it. It's
Yeah.
rather complicated, but I mean, it includes suburbs of New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, then moving westward. Pittsburgh, highly affected now in
Really?
suburban areas. Columbus, it's very recently, Columbus, Ohio. So that continues to spread. And I think I said before, the same tick is transmitting more than one infectious agent. We now know of 6 different infectious agents that is transmitting. One of them is quite serious, called Powassan encephalitis virus, which may cause permanent neurologic damage and can be fatal.
Goodness.
So this is a problem. It's a
Yeah.
public health problem.
Now, I got a couple follow-on to this.
Okay?
We want to talk about how we communicate these findings, what one can do to prevent this, where you see the research going in the future.
You know, how do we communicate these findings? First, we generally are working as groups.
Mm-hmm.
And it may be groups within the same institution, but it can be wider than that. And now with Zoom, having lab meetings with people in Europe as well as here. So groups of people working on it. One is talking about ideas, one is presenting data, trying to understand it better. This is pre-publication.
Okay.
But at some point, one feels that one has enough information to advance the story, and one sends it to medical journals for publication, but it then goes through peer review, which is an anonymous undertaking, and you get a written report back that's a critique
Mm-hmm.
of your work. And sometimes it has suggestions for further work that ought to be redone, that ought to be either redone or that it's extended. So the process of publication, from the time you start writing till it comes out, is often at least a year, sometimes longer. Now, that's been criticized,
Mm-hmm.
that you may have information that it would really be helpful for people to know. So now there are online journals that you can send your work to as a pre-publication. And someone has to understand it has not been through peer review, but nevertheless, it is available to people. Well, there's also the media.
Mm-hmm.
There are people doing, well, what I'm doing tonight with you.
Mm-hmm.
But there are also meetings in which, well, the rheumatologists get together really from all over the world, or the infectious disease people get together from all over the world. They present their data. That's how information is transmitted. I think it's a system that's really tries to present accurate information.
What is the benefit of writing these things, as opposed to, let's say, just doing a
Yeah.
kind of a flippant Zoom?
I think writing has 2 very important functions. One is it helps you understand it better, the person who's actually doing the writing. But also, I've seen over and over again, it's really when something is written, when a complex treatment is written, that it becomes possible for other physicians to follow the work. Now we have computer services as well that are picking up writing, putting it online, making it available. But I think something that's been written and has gone through peer review is the best system that we have worked out
Mm-hmm.
for being able to transmit accurate information.
Indeed, indeed. And I could argue from my academic appointment to some of the goods and bads of that. Lack of replication, we talked about this before.
Yes.
Let's talk just a few minutes about funding. Many, many years of work, half a century essentially.
Yes.
How was most of that work funded?
Most of that work is funded by the National Institutes of Health, the NIH. And it's specifically NIAID, the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, that's been quite important in doing this. And they also help to guide the work. And so there's study sections that review your work, usually every 5 years, and then you reapply for funding.
So you would apply for a grant that would provide you a flow for 5 years, and then at the end of 5 years reapply and you get evaluated.
Yes, so since I've worked on it for 50 years, it means I've done this a lot of times. But I'd also say in the United States, philanthropic funding is also a part of it, and to some degree, funding from the pharmaceutical industry is a part of it. That's usually once things are developed more, like for the drug studies that have been done, or the vaccine studies. Funding from industry is important. But foundations, philanthropic support, I think the United States really has the best system of funding for medical research. So it's included governmental sources, foundation supporters, and industry support.
Now, are there consequences, significant consequences of what seem to be some cutbacks in funding?
Oh, absolutely. And we really don't know where that's going. But that's been one problem. And a good example is all funding for mRNA vaccines has been paused or terminated. And such work was underway for a Lyme disease vaccine. Well, it's halted. But you know, there are other parts of this that are important. Our work is international in scope, and the people working on it are international. And a part of how that works is that people come from other countries to study with us. And that's very important. Any of the research universities that I've visited, been in, I would describe as international communities. That system is threatened. People are afraid to come here. They're going other places.
So we have to face the music on that one very clearly.
We do.
Okay, let's talk about something a little happier.
All right.
Easy. Now, in addition to being an accomplished medical researcher, you have a reputation among Chautauquans as being a splendid musician. Tell me about your music background.
Oh my. Well, I studied with teachers at Juilliard for 8 years, throughout college and throughout medical school. Music's always been important in my life. I play the piano at this point, and certainly enjoy playing with other people. So having chamber music sessions are part of what happens in my life. We also play for people. I have a group of people that are in the Boston Symphony that I play chamber music with. But you know, I'd also talk about that Chautauqua is the perfect place for a person like me. The orchestra is magnificent. They play 2 or 3 times a week. There are schools for vocal, piano, instrumental programs. They have recitals, master classes, which I attend regularly. Well, it's an ideal environment also, and all of this is embedded in the community, in the community of Chautauqua. And I think Chautauqua really is an exceptional place for communication and connection. So what could be better?
Indeed. Indeed. give you an infinite number of examples of
Yes.
that. And we talk with people in line who are accomplished and share and secure enough to have a light conversation without some fear of someone coming back at them or whatever. Now, a couple more questions. We're over time, but this is so much fun, I don't want to cut it off.
Okay.
Tell me about your take. Are musical skills and participation common among physicians?
It seems to be that they're more common among physicians than at least most other professions. And it particularly seems to me the scientific side of medicine, the discovery-based side. Well, there are many people who are not interested in music, but it seems more than you might think. And when Francis Collins was here and sang with Renee Fleming, now I should say who Francis Collins is. I mean, he was the person who was instrumental in leading the first sequencing of the human genome, and then became director of the NIH. And he said he always took his guitar with him wherever he goes. And he enjoys playing it, and he enjoys singing, and so he sang with Renee Fleming, the great soprano, on our Chautauqua stage. And he said, I'm paraphrasing, and consequently, I don't know that I got it quite right, but he said 70 to 80% of the people that he's worked with in this scientific realm do something in music. What that says to me, that something about the brain for doing scientific work has somewhat using parts of the brain that are important in music as well.
That's great. We are almost out of time. What else do we need to touch upon? You're deeply concerned about the funding issues,
Yeah.
and clearly we'd ask viewers to take a good look at this from their own perspective.
Let's talk about family.
Sure.
A very important part of Chautauqua, isn't it? And as
It
I
is.
said, the reason I married into it, well, it's my wife, Margaret. And she's come here most of the summers of her life. And that's my connection as well. But we have 4 children who grew up coming here during the summers, who love the place. And that community is an important part of the whole experience of being here.
It is.
So I feel I've been blessed in many ways.
Indeed, I can certainly relate to that. I've seen 5 generations of my family on
Yes.
the grounds
Yes.
with no apology about it.
Yes.
And again, count the blessings. And we joke from the parental perspective, often do more parenting from a Chautauqua porch than you do in the kitchen or living room back wherever we spend the winter time, and there are activities for kids and the like.
Yes. Yes. It's a wonderful environment.
It is, and we're fortunate in that respect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This has been terrific, and do come back.
Oh, thank you very much.
You bet.
Thank you.